Welcome to Religion Story YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. The morning sun lit up the vast green valley, where thousands of apple trees thrived, standing tall in perfect rows. Birds sang in harmony with the soft breeze, rustling the leaves and carrying the sweet scent of ripening fruit, soon to be harvested. Amidst this beauty stood a man in his 50s, dressed in an expensive suit and polished leather shoes out of place in the earthy orchard. He was the owner of the largest apple orchard in the region. A successful businessman known for his wealth and stern demeanor. He had built his company from scratch, through hard work and sharp business acumen. In the business world, he was respected, even feared. Yet in his heart, there was an emptiness he never admitted. Each morning, he walked through his orchard. Not because he had to, but because he relished the feeling of controlling something alive, something that grew because of his power and money. To him, the apple trees were more than just plants, they were symbols of his dominance. One quiet morning, as he strolled down a path between the trees, his eyes caught sight of a young man sitting beneath an apple tree. The man wore a plain, worn-out work outfit, and his hands were rough from labor. But what made the businessman stop wasn't his appearance, it was what he was doing. The worker was reading a book softly, yet with deep emotion. The businessman didn't understand a word, but the tone and rhythm of the recitation made him freeze. He stood silently behind a tree, listening. When the reading ended, the worker gently closed the book and looked up at the sky with a peaceful smile. The businessman stepped closer. "What are you reading?" he asked flatly. The worker was a little startled but replied politely, "This is the Quran, sir." "The Quran?" The businessman frowned. "What language is that?" "Arabic, sir. It is our holy book, the scripture of Islam." The businessman was quiet for a moment. "Do you understand what you're reading?" "Yes, some of it. I'm also learning its meaning. I read it every day to bring peace to my heart." Those words echoed in the businessman's mind. Peace to the heart. A simple phrase, yet so foreign to him. He, who had everything, money, power, properties in multiple cities, had never truly felt at peace. In the days that followed, he quietly observed the worker from a distance. Every morning and evening, the young man would read calmly, then return to work with enthusiasm. He was never late, never complained. One day, the businessman asked the field manager about him. "That boy? His name is Karim, sir. He came a few years ago. Hard-working, honest, always smiling. The other workers respect him a lot." Those words pierced the businessman's consciousness. He began to feel curious. What made a poor, low-ranking man seem so genuinely content? His curiosity turned into an obsession. He began secretly researching the Quran. He bought a translation in his language. At first, he read with skepticism, even looking for flaws to disprove. But the more he read, the more he felt drawn to it. Verse by verse, it felt as though the words spoke directly to him, about creation, life and death, pride and humility, sustenance, and most of all about inner peace. One night, in his grand office, he wept. For the first time since he became a man, he cried not from failure or loss but because his heart had been touched by something he couldn't explain. The next morning, he called Karim into his office. "I've been reading your book," he said softly. "And I want to learn more." Karim bowed his head and smiled. "Sir, I'm not a scholar. But I'll help as best I can. If you're truly interested, I can introduce you to my teacher." Months passed. Away from the media and public eye, behind quiet walls, the businessman embarked on a spiritual journey no one else knew about. He engaged in discussions, studied, reflected. He began to understand Tawheed, the oneness of God, the meaning of Salat, prayer, the importance of Zakat, charity, and the beauty of surrendering to the divine. Until one morning, he stood at the very same spot beneath the apple tree where he first heard the recitation. This time, alongside Karim and his spiritual teacher, he pronounced the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. Tears streamed down his face. The apple trees, which once symbolized his power, now felt like silent witnesses to a spiritual rebirth. After embracing Islam, his life changed. He did not give up his wealth, but he used it differently. He built schools, hospitals, and charitable orchards whose harvests were donated to the poor. He treated his workers with more compassion, and no longer looked down on anyone. He was still known as the owner of the largest apple orchard, but now, people recognized him not for his wealth, but for his sincerity and generosity. And every morning, he still walked through his orchard. But now, not to feel powerful, rather, to give thanks. From that day on, the businessman's life changed. He not only found peace in Islam, but also began to influence his family through the visible transformation within him. His wife, initially puzzled by her husband's sudden calm and patience, began to observe his change with an open heart. She saw how he now spoke gently, no longer raised his voice, and even wiped away tears when speaking about the afterlife. One night, in the warmth of their family room, the businessman recited verses from the Quran to his wife and children. He didn't force them, he simply invited them to feel what he felt. He spoke of peace, of the majesty of creation, of how life is temporary, and the importance of knowing God. That night, they didn't speak much, only exchanged glances. But within their hearts, a seed had been planted. A few months later, his wife and 2 children also declared the Shahada. There were no media headlines, no public announcements. It all happened in silence, in love, and in a profound search for meaning. The businessman's daughter, Amina, was a smart and highly educated young woman. She was raised in luxury but was not spoiled. From a young age, she had been taught discipline and responsibility. She witnessed her father's transformation, and she herself felt that Islam had brought direction to her life in a way she never knew she needed. But fate had something unexpected in store: love. The man who had been the path of guidance for her father Karim still worked at the apple orchard. Though he had been offered a higher position, he declined. He chose to remain among the field workers, for to him, the orchard was not just a livelihood, but a sacred place where he felt close to God and where he had once sparked a profound change in another's life. Amina began to notice Karim from afar. She saw his simplicity, his good manners, his gentle speech, and his love for knowledge and faith. She didn't love him for his looks or charm, but for his piety and sincerity. One night, Amina gathered the courage to speak to her mother. "Mother, if a man has no wealth, but possesses character, knowledge, and faith, would he be worthy of becoming a husband?" Her mother looked at her closely, then smiled with deep meaning. "If he is God-fearing, then he is the best choice." A few days later, the family gathered in the living room. The businessman sat in the center, surrounded by his wife and children. Then, he called Karim in. Karim entered hesitantly, unsure of what the meeting was about. He thought perhaps there was a new task or a charitable project to be assigned. But with a calm voice, the businessman said, "Karim, you brought light into our home. For God guided me through you. Now, I want to offer you something far greater than a job or a title." Karim bowed his head, confused. "I want you to become a part of our family. If you are willing, I would like you to marry my daughter, Amina." Karim was speechless. He looked at the businessman, then turned his gaze to the floor. Silent tears rolled down his cheeks. He had never dreamed of anything like this. He was just the son of an ordinary family, a hard-working man who loved his faith and lived a simple life. "Sir, I am not a wealthy man. I have nothing to offer." The businessman smiled. "You have more than wealth. You have a pure heart and noble character. That is what we seek." The wedding was held in a simple ceremony, beneath the shade of the very apple tree where everything had begun. There were no extravagant decorations, no grand festivities. Just the recitation of Quranic verses, smiles, and tears of joy from those present. Orchard workers stood shoulder to shoulder with family guests. There were no social classes. No gaps between them. All stood as servants of God, witnessing how faith and love united two worlds that once seemed so far apart. Today, the businessman is known as a widely respected philanthropist, yet remains humble. He doesn't call it a life change, he calls it a return to true living. And in the middle of the vast apple orchard, you can often see two pairs of hands working together, Amina and Karim, walking among the apple trees, remembering the past and planting new hopes not just for fruits of the earth, but for the generations to come. Because behind every apple that falls, there is wisdom. And behind every tree that grows, there is a story of faith, love, and unexpected guidance. Years passed. The apple orchard stood tall and proud not just as a place of business, but as a land rich with memories. The trees grew taller and fuller, bearing abundant fruit, as if maturing alongside the lives of those who lived around them. Karim was no longer just a farmhand. After marrying Amina, he was entrusted by his father-in-law to oversee much of the orchard's operations. Yet despite his elevated position, he remained humble, never forgetting his roots. He still worked in the fields, helped the laborers, offered advice, and taught the younger generation the importance of honesty and worship in their work. From his marriage to Amina, Allah blessed them with a son, whom they named Hassan. The boy was raised with love and knowledge, nurtured in an environment filled with Islamic values and living examples of faith. Every morning before school, Karim would take Hassan on a walk through the orchard. He would point to the apple trees and say, "Under that tree, I found my way to Allah." Young Hassan grew up with curiosity and wonder. He often listened to stories of how his grandfather, the orchard's owner, found divine guidance, and how love bloomed between his parents in a place once seen merely as a business venture. But time marched on. The businessman Amina's father, Karim's father-in-law, grew old. Though his body weakened, his spirit remained strong. He spent more time at home, reading the Quran, gazing out at the orchard through large glass windows, and occasionally calling Karim and Hassan to sit with him to hear stories of the prophets. On one quiet day, the old man summoned his entire family. He felt his time was near. In a soft but firm voice, he said, "All that I once had was mine. But now I realize it was all only entrusted to me. This orchard, this house, this wealth, they are but tests. What remains eternal are our deeds. Karim, my son, I trust you. Continue this not for profit, but for blessings. Turn this place into a field of reward. Don't let its fruits fill only the bellies of the rich. Feed the hungry. Build more schools. Let knowledge and faith be the greatest inheritance." Karim bowed his head, weeping. Amina embraced her father with tearful eyes. Even little Hassan cried, though he didn't fully understand. A few days later, the old man passed away peacefully in his sleep, smiling serenely. His face glowed, and orchard workers came from far and wide to attend his funeral prayer. He was buried on a small hill at the edge of the orchard, his favorite spot, the very place where he had first heard Karim recite the Quran. Years later, the apple orchard had become more than a place of fruit production. It was now a center of agricultural endowment, an Islamic school, and a free clinic. Karim fulfilled his father-in-law's trust wholeheartedly. He refused to sell the land to wealthy conglomerates, despite their tempting offers. To him, the orchard wasn't just an asset, it was a spiritual legacy. Hassan grew into a righteous and intelligent young man. He memorized the Quran by the age of 14 and began teaching the children of farm workers at 18 in the small school by the orchard. He often brought his friends from the city to stay overnight, showing them how simple living could bring peace. One morning, Hassan stood beside his father near his grandfather's grave. He said, "Father, Grandpa found Allah in this orchard. You met Mom here too. Do you think I'll find my destiny here as well?" Karim smiled, gazing at the apple trees beginning to blossom again. "If your heart is sincere and your intentions are pure, Allah will guide you. Wherever you stand, that place can become a field of divine guidance." Hassan lowered his head, picked an apple, and looked up at the sky. And the wind gently passed through the old apple tree's witnesses to a tale of faith, love, and a beautiful death.